What's your highest priority if you get elected? What bill would you push first?
Restore public safety. We need to go through and repeal about 15 bills that made it so that local municipalities can't police the communities effectively.
Can you give us an example of a couple bills that passed that you think you had to string?
Well, bail reform bill is one of them. The bail reform bill made it so that you couldn't hold a local law enforcement agency couldn't hold someone who was arrested for a Measure 11 crime. That includes up to murder. That bail reform law is terrible. I would absolutely repeal the bills that made it so that you couldn't arrest someone for interfering with a police officer, which is one of the most common riot arrests that are made during riots. You tell people to move, they don't move, then they arrest you for interfering with a police officer. But they can't do that, but only in cities that have 60,000 more in population.
I'm sorry, so you got to pardon my ignorance here. Yeah. The legislature passed a bill.
Yeah, multiple
that
bills.
Says in cities over 60,000,
yeah,
you cannot arrest someone for
interfering with a
police officer.
Yes.
Okay.
How many cities in Oregon have over 60,000? Well, a few.
3.
Yeah. Exactly.
So what's this other one? You're saying they can't hold a Measure 11?
Yeah, it's the bail reform bill. It's on my website. If you want the exact one, go to edtl.com/Wagner and you can see everything he passed.
Do you know the details of how that's written?
Yeah, go ahead and read it.
My interpretation.
Go to my website and read it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to those two?
But it's not your interpretation, but let me explain something to you real quick before he talks. What you've seen in Portland with the district attorney Mike Schmidt letting people out who have been arrested for assault and armed robbery and other crimes, that's the bill. So you can interpret it differently, but Mike Schmidt interprets it the way I interpret it. What's that? It states it. It states it in the bill. You got to read it. You got to read every word. See, it's like the 7-day bill. When you look at it, you're like, oh, this is cool. This postmark makes total sense. Someone mailed it on election day. They should have the right to vote. But when you go down to section 1 in parentheses 8, it states right there on that line. See, and see, it's that line that matters. That's the ones that they use. You got to read it all very carefully.
Rob, do you want to respond to any of that?
Yeah, there was a lot of testimony on that legislation, both in committee in the Senate, and I believe in the House Judiciary Committee.
Which one are we talking about now?
I think bail reform, I'm kind of lost a little bit into this kind of abstruse, down this kind of rabbit hole. But if you look at legislative council's
Let's go down that rabbit hole, Rob.
If you look at legislative council's interpretation of that legislation, you actually look at the testimony by the statewide district attorneys association, the contention that this legislation does what is stated is not factual.
How about the other?
Don't believe your lying eyes.
How about the other bill you referred to?
Which one is that again?
Well, you referred to
the bail reform, the riot protection bill.
The interference with.
Yeah, you protect rioters. Then they made it so that when you arrested rioters, you couldn't put their mugshots on and make it public. I mean, that's public information. That's the other one too. There's a bunch of them. There's a whole bunch. You go to my website and look at it. There's a ton. Let's go down that hole, Rob.
Yeah, I would honestly have to do a little bit more research. That's not my interpretation.
Yeah, he voted for these bills and passed them as the Senate leader. Of
what passed. And I think if you actually review the legislation and you go back and look, this was a package of legislation that State Representative Janelle Bynum, who is
he's gonna blame Janelle Bynum,
the House Judiciary Committee member, and if you actually look at where the testimony was and what the record
people are dying because
I am curious. Do you think there's a connection between? I mean, we are seeing a rise in particularly violent crimes in Portland. Do you think there is a connection between that legislation and what we're seeing in Portland?
I do not.
Well, why? Why do you think that?
Because he's going to lose the election if he admits to the truth.
Let me speak, Ben.
I'm just so in terms of riot protection, or
I'm just saying if we look at all of these policies together and whether there's a connection.
A lot of it takes a long time when you're talking about legislative implementation. Mm-hmm. So if you look at rising crime rates and police response, I just think that it would be really hard to find independent review that would directly correlate between legislation that was passed and what you're talking about in terms of violent crime.
Let's go for a 4-block walk around the corner. Let's have an independent review. You can see it with your own eyes.
I don't know how you...
See, Rob even got the endorsement by the independent party so he can put independent next to Democrat in the voters pamphlet so he can try to get as far away from his policies as possible and completely hoodwink the voters into thinking that he's some kind of independent. This guy is a radical leftist. There's blood in our streets because of his policy. People are dying in our streets with needles in their arms because of his policy. And if you think I'm upset and passionate, you're damn right, because I'm an angry Oregonian that worked for 2 years to sit next to this guy
Walk
and
me
let him
through
know what I
exactly
think.
the connection.